I used to believe there would be a perfect moment to begin, a clean and certain point where everything would finally make sense. My name is Robert. I'm 88 years old, and I'm still trying to understand why that moment never came. When I was young, I thought time was something I could manage, something I could arrange like furniture in a room. I told myself I would take risks later, love more deeply later, speak honestly later. There was always a reason to wait. I didn't think of it as fear back then. I called it being responsible. I grew up in a small house with thin walls and big expectations. My father worked long hours and rarely spoke about anything beyond what needed to be done. My mother filled the silence with routine, with meals at the same time every day, with quiet sacrifices no one ever acknowledged. I learned early that life was something you endured first and maybe enjoyed after, if there was time left. In my 20s, I met a woman named Claire. She had a way of laughing that made everything feel lighter, like the world wasn't as heavy as I had always believed. She talked about traveling, about seeing places neither of us could pronounce properly. I remember standing with her one evening outside a small diner, the air cold and sharp, and she asked me a simple question. She said, "Robert, what are you waiting for?" I smiled at her like I always did when I didn't have an answer. I told her I needed to get my life in order first, a stable job, some savings, a plan. I said we had time. She looked at me in a way I didn't understand back then. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter than that, something like disappointment, but softer. A year later, she was gone. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually, like a door closing so slowly you don't notice until it's shut. She wrote me a letter before she left. I kept it in a drawer for years, telling myself I would read it when I was ready. I never was. I threw myself into work after that. It felt easier. Work gave me clear goals, measurable progress, something I could control. I told myself I was building a future worth living. I worked late nights, weekends, holidays. Promotions came, and with them, a sense that I was doing something right. People respected me. They called me dependable, disciplined. I wore those words like armor. They protected me from the quiet voice inside that sometimes asked if I was missing something. Whenever that voice grew louder, I would tell myself the same thing I had always said. Not yet. Soon. When the time is right. I married in my 30s. Her name was Margaret. She was kind and patient in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. She didn't ask for much, which made it easy for me to give even less. I told myself I was providing for her, for us, and that was enough. She would sometimes suggest small things, a weekend trip, a dinner out, an evening walk after work. I always had a reason to postpone. There was always something more urgent, something more practical. We had 2 children. I remember holding my son for the first time, feeling something shift inside me, something I didn't quite recognize. I promised myself I would be present for them. But presence, I learned too late, is not something you promise. It's something you choose, again and again, in the smallest moments. I missed more of those moments than I care to admit. School plays, quiet conversations, the simple act of sitting together without distraction. I was there, physically, most of the time. But my mind was always somewhere else, already planning the next step, the next improvement, the next version of a future that never seemed to arrive. Years passed in a way that felt slow at the time, but now seems almost instantaneous. My children grew up. They became adults with lives of their own. Our conversations became shorter, less frequent. There was no single moment where things changed. Just a gradual distance, built from all the times I wasn't fully there. Margaret and I grew older together, but not always closer. There was a quiet space between us that neither of us knew how to fill. One evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked, very calmly, "Robert, when do we get to live?" I didn't understand the question. I thought we were living. We had a house, stability, everything I had worked for. I told her that. She nodded, but her eyes told a different story. I see that now. At the time, I just felt confused, maybe even a little defensive. She passed away when I was 67. It wasn't unexpected, but it still felt like something had been taken from me too soon. After the funeral, the house felt different. Not empty exactly, but quieter in a way that made it hard to breathe. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The chair where she used to sit, the books she never finished, the small notes she would leave around the house, reminders about things that didn't seem important then. That's when the waiting started to feel different. It was no longer about preparing for something better. It became a habit, something I didn't know how to stop. I told myself I would reconnect with my children, travel, maybe even open that letter from Claire. But I kept delaying. I kept telling myself I needed to feel ready first. Now I sit here at 88, in a house filled with the echoes of a life I thought I was building carefully. The truth is, I was building it cautiously, and there's a difference. Caution keeps you safe, but it also keeps you still. A few months ago, I finally opened that letter. The paper was fragile, the ink slightly faded. Claire's handwriting was exactly as I remembered it, steady and clear. She didn't write anything dramatic, no accusations, no anger, just a simple truth. She said she couldn't keep waiting for a life that I was always postponing. She said she hoped I would one day understand that life doesn't wait for certainty. I sat there for a long time after reading it, holding that piece of paper like it might disappear if I let go, and for the first time I allowed myself to feel something I had avoided for decades. Not regret in the loud, overwhelming sense people talk about, but something quieter, a steady realization that settled deep inside me. I had spent my entire life waiting for the right time to begin living, without ever noticing that time was already passing, already offering me moments I could have chosen. There was no perfect moment waiting for me somewhere in the future. There were only the imperfect ones I kept overlooking. I don't tell you this because I have answers. At my age, I've learned that answers are often just stories we tell ourselves to feel less uncertain. What I do have is perspective, and it came at a cost I can't undo. If you're listening to me now, maybe you're waiting for something too. A better opportunity, more stability, a clearer sign that it's safe to move forward. I understand that instinct. It feels reasonable, even wise. But I can tell you from where I'm sitting that waiting has a way of becoming a lifetime if you let it. There were so many small moments I thought didn't matter enough at the time. A conversation I could have had, a trip I could have taken, a risk I could have accepted. None of them felt like the right time, but together they were my life. And I let them pass one by one, because I believed something better was coming. The truth is, there is no moment that arrives fully prepared for you. Life doesn't announce itself with certainty. It shows up quietly, in ordinary days, in simple choices, in opportunities that feel inconvenient or uncertain. And if you keep waiting for everything to align perfectly, you might look up one day, like I did, and realize that the alignment you were waiting for was never the point. I'm not asking you to change everything overnight. Life doesn't work that way either. But maybe the next time you feel that instinct to wait, you pause and ask yourself a different question. Not whether the time is right, but whether it's already here. Because if there's one thing I've learned after 88 years, it's this. The right time isn't something you find. It's something you decide. And sometimes deciding a little earlier can make all the difference.